So as we are starting our muscle physiology class, in last class we have talked very briefly about skeletal muscle. So what are the general note or general concept of muscle or physiology of the muscle? So what is the function of muscle? Locomotion, and that is movement of our body or walking or different distances, or many muscles work together for our movement, walking activities. Then peristalsis, this is digestion or movement of the food particle in our GIT. There is also muscle play a very significant role. Because of muscle, it moves. Their contraction and relaxation. And cardiac function, we have discussed about the cardiac muscle, the heartbeat. Then vasoconstriction, we have discussed also during the cardiovascular system. Then vasoconstriction, vasodilatation. So those also maintain the BP and now many functions. So movement of the blood in our vessels, the muscle, and sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, they act upon the muscle and they cause vasoconstriction or vasodilatation. Then posture maintenance, our sitting positions, sleeping positions. So our posture, those posture also involve many muscle and maintain our posture. Then heat generations. So during the winter seasons, the movement or the shivering mechanism of the muscle that also helps to generate heat and maintain the body temperature in our body temperature. Maintenance of the body temperature is important. So, and what are the properties of muscle? Some of the properties we have discussed in cardiac muscle. So we'll discuss again the properties of muscle, the excitability. So muscles are excited cell, capacity to receive and respond to a stimuli. So if the muscle is stimulated, they will respond to the stimuli by contraction. Then contractility. Contractility, it is the ability to shorten, contraction. When the muscle contracts, it shortens. Or repeated stimuli of the same intensity cause increasing the strength of contraction. This phenomenon is called trapeze or staircase phenomenon. So that phenomenon, if the same is strength, if it is given to the muscle or stimuli, so the contraction, strength of contraction will increase. This phenomenon is called trapeze. Then extensibility, ability to stretch, like when the blood moves in the blood vessels, the vascular or the muscle in the blood vessel, it will be stretched. Extensibility, this is also property of the muscle. And elasticity, ability to return to original shape after being stretched. And that is mostly we can see in the blood vessels when the ventricle pump blood to the aorta is stretched out, and again it will come back to its size, and that is also help in the movement of the blood in the vessels and also maintain the blood pressure. So that is elasticity, extensibility, contractility, and excitability. These are the 4 properties of muscle. So skeletal muscle, it is about 40% of the body is skeletal muscle. Only 10% is smooth and cardiac muscle. So the skeletal muscle, it is a lot in our body, and it has many functions for our body or daily activity of our body. So what is origin and insertion? What is origin and insertion of muscle? So origin, it is least movable part, and insertion is the most movable part. It is less movable part, and insertion is the most movable part. We will see in the diagram. So one end of the muscle is fixed or anchored into a bone. So one end of the muscle is anchored or fixed into a bone, that is immovable part that cannot move. But the other end is attached to tendon, that is movable part. So contraction of muscle brings origin and insertion together. So when we see this diagram, what is origin? So here the origin is the end of a skeletal muscle located more proximal to the center of the body. During muscle contraction, the origin of muscle does not move. They does not move. Hence, it is the point of attachment, which is relatively fixed. It means the bone in this attachment point is fixed. So if we take this diagram, this is the origin where the muscle is fixed or attached in the bone. It cannot move. But on the other hand, insertion, this is the muscle which is attached to the tendon, and this part is movable. This part is movable, and this part is origin. That is immovable, attached to a bone, fixed. But insertion, they are attached to the tendon, which is movable. So that is about origin and the insertion. Then flexure and extensor. What is flexure? This diagram have some mistake or not representing properly what is extension and flexure. So we will see another diagram. Flexure involved in flexing bicep muscle, for example, and helps in bending. It helps in bending and decreasing the joint angle. That you have to remember. Decreasing the joint angle. The muscle which decrease the joint angle, for example, bicep, that is flexure. Then what is extensor? Extensor, that is extending, for example, tricep. Increasing the joint angle. Flexor decreasing the joint angle, and extensor increasing the joint angle. We'll see in this diagram flexure. So this is a bicep muscle. When this bicep muscle contract, so the angle, this angle will decrease, because this bicep muscle, it will pull this radius toward this direction. So the bending and this angle will decrease because of the bicep. This is flexor. And when this is tricep, when this is extensor muscle. This muscle, when it will contract, the angle of the joint will increase. The angle of the joint will increase. That is extensor. So extensor increase the joint angle, and flexor decrease the joint angle. So that is about extensor and the flexure. Then adductor and abductor. Adductor are muscles that pull a limb or arm toward the midline. So this is adductor muscle, and abductor moving away from the midline. So for example, this is a midline, and if the muscle going away from the midline, this is abductor. And if the muscle that cause the limb to move toward the midline, that is adductor muscle. So muscle that pull the limb toward the midline, that is adductor, and abductor moving away from the midline. Suppose, for example, this is midline. if I draw the midline, if the muscle that cause your arm or leg toward the midline, then it is adductor. And if it going away from the midline, that is abductor muscle. Then obturator paralysis. What is obturator paralysis? We will see in the diagram. So inability to adduct one or both of the hind legs after perforation due to injury of obturator nerve. This obturator nerve supplies the adductor muscle, and that adductor muscle, the function is which moves the leg toward the midline. So after perforation, so the animal cannot bring the leg toward the or bring back to the position, and they fail. That is obturator paralysis, because the nerve is not functioning because of the pressure or some injury in the nerve. So when we see this diagram, or before that, the obturator nerve, it is most frequently seen in cow than mares. Obturator nerve supplies the adductor muscle of the thigh. When damaged, both hind legs is splayed and cow is unable to rise. If held on its feet, the legs slide out literally. One side required assistance, but sometimes bilaterally the animal cannot able to rise. So, for example, this is an animal that obturator nerve paralysis. So after perforation, the leg have to bring back, the animal have to stand. So after giving birth, so because of the obturator nerve paralysis or injury in the nerve, the nerve which supplies to the adductor muscle, that adductor muscle is not working, so the animal cannot able to stand. If one side is paralyzed, then they need assistance, then they can stand. If both the obturator muscle is not working due to obturator nerve paralysis, then the animal cannot stand up. So this kind of the animal, their legs, they cannot bring back or they cannot adduct. So that muscle is not working. So this kind of problem you can see after parturition. So that is about obturator nerve and extensor, flexure, origin, and insertion. So we will see the types of skeletal muscle. Types of skeletal muscle. Here we will discuss two types of skeletal muscle, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 and type 2. What are the difference between them? Type 1, it is also called slow twitch or red or dark, because it is red or dark because due to the myoglobin. And type 2 or fast twitch, white muscle. So type 1 or type 1 is looks red, and type 2 is white or fast twitch. Type 1, it has larger amount of myoglobin, and it has mitochondria and blood flow or the capillaries. So more blood flow to this muscle. Type 2, less amount of myoglobin, and mitochondria and blood flow are capillaries. The blood flow is less comparable to type 1. And type 1 is aerobic. Oxidation is primary due to good oxygen supply, because blood flow is good and capillary supply is good, and more mitochondria. So their primary is aerobic oxidation. They require oxygen. So oxygen supply is well. But this type of muscle, they are very fast. They immediately or they function or immediately they do their work, and they are anaerobic. The anaerobic is their primary metabolism, and because of they don't have the good blood supply, so they are anaerobic and they are fast twitch. And this is here the glycolytic process is less, but here because it is an anaerobic metabolism, the enzyme required for anaerobic metabolism or glycolytic process, the enzyme, it has rich amount of enzyme in these cells as compared to the type 1 muscle. And lactic acid accumulation is less here, but type 2, because they are anaerobic metabolism and poor blood supply, lactic acid accumulation is more. Then contraction is for longer period, because the blood flow is more and then continuous supply of oxygen and more mitochondria. The aerobic metabolism, it gives longer time for energy for maintaining contraction or the function of the muscle. But here anaerobic metabolism is the short durations. They cannot continue. The storage of energy they utilize when it is finished. They when they when the storage energy is finished, they cannot continue. But here type 1, it is mostly aerobic and continuous oxygen supply and continue production of the ATP for their contraction. So it is a longer period of contraction, but this is shorter period of contraction, and not easily get fatigue. This muscle not easily get fatigue, but the type 2, they get easily fatigue. Lesser amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum in type 1, but here larger amount of sarcoplasmic reticulum, because their contraction is fast and more strong. Then another type we have intermediate muscle. These muscles fiber are between type 1 and type 2. And type 1 muscle is able to sustain longer because it is this is an aerobic metabolism. They are able to sustain the fight. Sustain the fight means they will maintain or sustain a longer period of contraction or sustain the fight. So today we will discuss up to here. For next class, we will see the anatomy or microscopic structure, the anatomy and the microscopic structure of muscle, skeletal muscle.